Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. This is the Wild Tangent channel, and this is a feature that we call Your Blind Side. And this is for um, identifying, pointing out things that the truther movement is missing, uh, their Achilles heel, so to speak, their blind spots, things that they are um, neglecting to their detriment, just coming from, again, what I consider to be like a big brother. Been doing this for a long time and much longer than most of them. And I see that they're mostly focused on the new stuff, the 20th century, 21st century, and going back into uh, their adult lives. But I think very few of them have deconstructed um, uh, their child upbringing, and um, haven't really done any really deep spiritual work. Um, just Christianity is not deep spiritual work. Um, it just isn't. It's like elementary religion. Um, you know, just very black and white, right and wrong, very little nuance. Um, and then you can get into a little bit more nuance if you kind of get into some of the extra scriptural aspects of it. Gnosticism, you look at okay, so there's your basic Bible. You've got the 39 books or whatever of the Old Testament. Now, most of those books are giving you true facts about history, but it's not a religious text. There's not really a whole lot in there having to do with how you should act, right and wrong. The Ten Commandments and so on. These are just about obeying Yahweh. Yahweh is not God. Yahweh is a dude. He is one of the dudes that is a member of the Elohim. This is a group of um, powerful, technologically advanced, and probably pretty smart dudes who live in the flesh and blood, and they are not gods. Um, we could call them gods with a small g to be charitable, but they usurped God in chapter 1 of Genesis. So the only God that appears in Genesis in the Old Testament is in the first chapter of Genesis. And then after that, we're talking about a bunch of dudes who genetically engineered human beings to be workers for them. And all the strictures, all the Deuteronomy, Leviticus, all that stuff is for obeying these dudes. And um, now, then when you get to New Testament, the New Testament is entirely a psychological operation written by the Romans. The Romans were trying to subdue the Jews, to mellow out the Jews. The Jews had been a major pain in the side of the Romans for over 100 years, culminating in this war between the Jews and the Romans from 66 until 73 AD. The In the 70s, after the war was over, two of the generals in that war, Vespasian and his son Titus, became the emperors. And they had a vested interest in figuring out how to make sure that the Jews didn't revolt anymore. And so they knew that the Jews were waiting on a Messiah that had been prophesied that was going to help them overthrow the Romans. And so they instead wrote a story about a Jewish Messiah who was a Prince of Peace and was, in general, entirely deferential to the Romans, believed that you should render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and walk an extra mile and turn the other cheek, um, while attacking um, the Jewish rituals and traditions, such as the sacrifice and overturning the tables. And um, so now it turns out that the Romans actually wrote some of the Old Testament as well, because they commissioned the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the um, Hebrew Bible. And you can see that that's all a scam. There was Josephus, who is the main culprit here. Josephus is the author of the New Testament, or at least a big chunk of it. Now, Josephus, I don't believe really existed, but he was a pen name for this guy named Arius Piso, who was an insider to the Flavian court and just a high noble aristocrat for the Romans that never became Caesar, but was always kind of like the shadow Caesar, the Henry Kissinger of his day. And he was the main engine behind Josephus. And if you read Josephus's War of the Jews, that uh, um, was admittedly a product of the Roman Caesars, came out of Caesar's palace. Um, Josephus's War of the Jews runs parallel to the New Testament. They both they're in conversation with one another. They were both written by the same people at the same time for the same reason, and so um, you can tell that the New Testament was written by Josephus, whoever Josephus was, and but he also commissioned the Septuagint, which is now, you probably know that the New Testament was written in Greek, which is a red flag right off the bat, because Jesus would have been, had he existed, would have uh, been writing and speaking in Aramaic, a version of Hebrew, um, as opposed to Greek. Very few people in Palestine were speaking in Greek, and hardly any were writing in Greek, whereas it was commonplace in Rome. They also used Latin, but that was more for the royals. And but they commissioned, and this is because of Piso, he wanted to have a handy copy of the Old Testament that he could read. And so he used some of the Herods. Um, now the Herods, in if you read the Bible, most Christians, think there's just one Herod. There's like dozens of them. They're a dynasty, and the one that was in charge of Judea um, when the Jews revolted in 66 AD was Herod Agrippa II. He fled to Rome, and he was friends with Piso and Titus, and um, they used the Herods to uh, write a Greek translation of the Hebrews scriptures in the Old Testament, and that way Piso could work from them because he, in order to write his Gospels and the epistles and the rest of the New Testament, he needed to be able to refer to the Old Testament, which he couldn't really do because he didn't read the Hebrew. So he got that translation. But then, as Josephus, he wrote um, the history of the Septuagint, and he placed it back in the third century BC. And so he said that this translation occurred in the third century BC. And you can see the error that he makes because I don't know if he made it on purpose, but Septuagint means 70. Sept means 70. And it was the 70, or really 72 Jewish scholars, six from each tribe, six from each of the 12 tribes, to go to Alexandria, Egypt, and participate in this, you know, um, you know, seminar, or convocation, to translate all of the Hebrew scriptures into Greek. And this is known as the Septuagint. And historians pretty much take Josephus at his word about when this occurred and why this occurred. But it's anachronistic because the 12 there weren't 12 tribes of Israel at the time that this was happening. So that's off right away. Um, the tribes of Israel had been dispersed hundreds of years before that. And so there was just uh, the two tribes, the southern tribes. So, not sure what Josephus is really getting at there. I'll have to look at that again. And I know that Russell Jamerkin has a couple books on um, that history, and um, Manetho and Berossus are two ancient historians that talk about the Septuagint, but I believe both of them, or at least certainly one of them, Manetho, I believe, uh, is a pen name of Piso. Now, this guy Piso really did a number on Western civilization, because he penned a ton of things that, um, not only just the New Testament, but also all the works of Josephus. It looks like a lot of the works of Aristotle, um, and then tons of other Greek classics, Plutarch, um, Nicomachus of Gerasa, um, who was a Pythagorean mathematician, uh, Claudius Ptolemy, who was an ancient Egyptian, not ancient, uh, first, second century BC astronomer, who said that the everything rotated around the Earth. And then also um, a hero of Alexandria, who was a inventor, and many others, as well as the Gnostics. So that's what I was going to get to, which I really didn't. Maybe next time. But the Gnostic Gospels were mainly the ones that were discovered at Nag Hammadi in Egypt, not till 1945. And this includes a number of other Gospels, and some epistles, and some apocalypses, and then some just other works, but that are mainly considered to be Gnostic. And maybe tomorrow I'll talk about how Gnosticism is really only incidentally Christian. Uh, that I don't know why these Christian and Gnosticism don't really go together. The Jesus part of Gnosticism is entirely um, superfluous. It's not necessary. Gnosticism doesn't require Christianity. And to that extent, I can agree with Gnosticism. When they start imputing the Jesus into it, then they're losing the plot. Um, but if you kind of um, look into the Pisos, the plot was already lost because most of the stuff uh, that I can tell anyway in the Gnostic Gospels was uh, also part of the psychological operation, kind of like they're playing both sides, um, and as well as the church fathers, uh, Justin Martyr and Saint Ignatius and Origen and Irenaeus and Marcion and Tertullian, all the way up to Eusebius. All of these people were Romans, um, writing for the Roman Caesars. And then you can see it all phases into the Roman Catholic Church, which held all of Europe in the feudal system for over 1,000 years. So you can see this is a terribly successful thing that we still haven't really uncovered. A lot of the work of Joseph Atwill is getting on the right track, as well as Michael Menescott and many others who have written scholarship. But this is in your blind side. This is stuff that the truther movement is completely in the dark about. As far as I can tell, I haven't heard anybody talking about this in uh, the 9 or 10 years that I've been paying attention to the truther movement here. Um, I wasn't even aware that it existed before I was living in a cave because I had been red pilled 25 years before that, and when there was nobody else to talk to, and so I've been living like a monk for the last 30 years, 35 years, a highly you know high functioning monk, I guess. Um, um, barely eking out an existence, but doing a lot of digging. And yeah, I haven't heard any of you patriots talking about any of these many uh, issues having to do with your scriptures. It's like you turn off your mind. You turn off that critical aspect of your mind or your autistic aspect as soon as the incantation Bible comes up or the incantation Jesus comes up. You just turn that off and you just become a sheep again, just like, you know, we all used to be at one point. Um, so that is where I see the almost the one of the main blind sides that you have. So watch this Wild Tangent Network, and maybe you will become aware of your blind side. So thanks for tuning in today. Like, share, subscribe, comment, contribute, and remember to watch your blind side.